time, can I please request for all of you to switch your mobile devices to the silent mode? Thank you. Distinguished guests and fellow colleagues, welcome to today's CLC lecture series. My name is Choe. The Centre was jointly established by the Ministry of National Development and the Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources in 2008 to distill, create, and share knowledge on livable and sustainable cities. The CLC lecture series is one of the platforms through which urban thought leaders share best practices and exchange ideas and experiences. Today's lecture is part of the CLC Urban Pioneer Lecture Series, where we hope to share Singapore's urban development expertise and experience over the last 40 to 50 years. We are very honoured to have 4 distinguished speakers today. Urban Redevelopment Authority pioneers, Mr. Choe and Mrs. Koh-Lim, Dr. Hean, CEO of the Housing and Development Board, and Mr. Philip CEO of Far East Organization. They will share insights on Singapore's urban transformation journey and challenges ahead. Today's lecture will start off with short presentations by each of our 4 speakers. This will be followed by a Q&A session with all of you in the audience, which will be moderated by Professor Lily Hong, Vice President and Vice Provost at the National University of Singapore. So before the session begins, let's welcome Mr. Koo Chai, Executive Director of CLC, to give the opening remarks. Mr. Koo, please.
Transformation of Singapore, and Ronnie said, is this about the future of Singapore? Is this going to be discussing about the master plan that URA just released? So if you think that this is going to be about that, I'm afraid you have come to the wrong This is kind of more backward looking than forward looking, right? But seriously, I think we have lots of lessons to learn from the past that I think will help us a lot in the future. 50 years ago, I think Singapore had a population of less than 2 million, yet it was overcrowded, especially in the city centre. We had 80 to 100 people crammed in tiny cubicles in our shop houses. So the city was congested with traffic, the rivers were badly polluted, there were frequent floods, you can imagine, more frequent than today, and water shortages, crime and disease. So we were not a very livable city at all. In fact, we were a classic case of unsustainable urbanization. Today, with a population that is 3 times as high, at 5.4 million, and much higher density than we were, I think we are one of the more livable cities now in the world. And at CLC, as Cheong said, our mission is to really try and distill, create, and share knowledge on livable and sustainable cities, drawing largely on the experience and expertise of those who have been responsible for Singapore's urban transformation. And today, we have a really stellar panel to share with us the story of Singapore's urban development. 50 years ago, a young, freshly graduated architect planner from Australia joined the HDB. The HDB was formed in 1960, and by the mid-60s was already on its way to tackling the housing problem with its rapid building of low-cost housing. Choe was asked to set up and head the urban renewal department in HDB. I think he, more than anyone else, was responsible for getting Singapore's highly successful urban renewal program off the ground and set up the URA. Pioneered what we now call PPP. The amazing thing is, somebody recently asked me about PPPs, Singapore's PPP's experience, and a lot of the young people were kind of saying, oh, okay, sports hub, this and that. And I have to correct them. No, Singapore was really a pioneer of PPP in urban renewal. Today, there are all these experts going around talking about PPP, but really, we pioneered, Choe really pioneered PPP in Singapore with the URA land sales program. In the 60s and 70s, I think those of you who are around then, the city had lots of these signboards with the logo and the caption, another UR project, another renewal project. Alan was more than an architect planner, he was a super salesman for Singapore's urban planning, as he had to win over private developers, in the kind of condition Singapore was, to take the risk and bid for the sites. He also helped to design and plan for the reclamation of what we now know as the Marina Bay area, the Marina South, Marina Centre, Marina East, which houses the new downtown and Gardens by the Bay. Yes, I think for those of you who are very young, we started planning that reclamation, that piece of land, way back in the 60s and 70s. Alan's stamp on the URA is a creative, can-do spirit, which is still very much in the DNA of URA today, as can be seen by the very creative master plan which was just exhibited. And he was also my first boss in the URA when I came back from Australia in 1976. I think it was to kind of show the spirit of, I kind of did not listen to what PSC was going to do and probably assign me to a government department. I strolled into his office one day and asked him, since urban redevelopment was kind of taking off greatly, can I join you? And he promptly said yes. So I'm glad that he was such an inspiring first boss. So joining the panel today is a member of the URA pioneering team, and probably the person who has contributed the most and for the longest period in the URA. Mrs. Koh-Lim joined the URA soon after it was formed in 1974 and just retired as chief planner in 2008. So Win Jin has been really a stalwart figure in our urban redevelopment history, and few know how tenacious and how fiercely professional she has been in government, fighting hard, especially for the cause of conserving our urban heritage. Then we have Mrs. Cheong, who needs no introduction, as she has most competently helmed both the URA and now HDB, and on her shoulders rest some of the more challenging issues that we face today in planning and housing. And finally, just to kind of balance the panel up a little bit, we have someone whose company did the actual job of taking the risk and putting in the capital to build our city. Without the private sector and without companies like Far East, Singapore will not be what it is today. So Philip Ng contributes immensely for the public good, and we are honored that he sits on the CLC's advisory board. And moderating the panel, I think we have someone very familiar with the urban development and conservation scene, and a CLC advisor, Professor Kong. So I'm sure you will all, I hope, enjoy listening to, and I hope you have lots of questions for them at the end. So with that, can I now invite Mr. Choe to take the stage?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and Mr. Koon, Executive Director of Liveable Cities. I am invited to talk about the story of urban renewal, how it started, and my role in helping to start urban renewal. I think after hearing the story from Koon is actually more than kind to place my role. Actually, it was a team spirit, and more than ever, I had to depend on a good team that helped URA to where it is today. But seriously, the story I'm going to talk to you is about 50 years ago, when we first started. Like all things in cities, cities are actually dictated by political leadership. Singapore is no different. What we had was that in the early days, the British colonial government tried to solve public housing, but it was not very successful. It was only until the new government, People's Action Party, came into power in 1959 that things took a change. One of the political platforms of the People's Action Party then was to eradicate the acute housing shortage and to clear slums. This they did because soon after the PAP was formed, they developed and formed Housing and Development Board to take over the Singapore Improvement Trust. Now the colonial government over more than the last 10 years before 1959 set up the Singapore Improvement Trust, SIT, to try and help with housing. But over more than 10 years, the SIT only built about 10,000 units of flats. Unfortunately, this was way below what was required. But when the government formed HDB in early 1960s, what happened was it created an exodus of the expat community, the experts in SIT. All the architects and planners left and blocked back to England. So HDB started on very modest terms. They had only a handful of architects, mainly fresh architects. But then, when the board was formed, they have very dynamic people who headed the board. The chairman then was Mr. Lim Kim San, a businessman, aided by Cheong, a very, very hardworking and determined civil servant who would stand at no nonsense. And of course, they also had Mr. Tay Chiang Wan, who was one of the key architects in the initial team of HDB architects, all of them fresh architects, mainly from Australia. At that point of time, when they started HDB, they only had a handful of architects, but there were no planners in the midst. I happened to be the first architect and planner to return to Singapore and was headhunted to join HDB, which I did in 1962. At that time, my role in HDB was mainly involved with planning. Sorry for it. How do I prevent this on the slide? Sorry for the interruption. Anyway, when we started public housing, my role was to set up planning standards, at the same time build new towns. This is some of the jobs we did in Toa Payoh New Town. How we were able to achieve 10,000 units a year by the government with HDB doing the work was we started by building very simple 1 and 2 room and 3 room units. This gave us the sheer numbers that were required to meet the needs at that time. And at the same time, we also did planning standards which were more quantitative in importance and speed rather than for qualitative development. So we started with simple slab blocks, which is not the best way to do things, but it's the cheapest and fastest way to get the numbers required to help meet with the housing shortage. From the early stages of HDB, we then went on to do other things. I joined the HDB in the 1960s, and along the way, we had to do a lot of other works. After 2 years of development in public housing, the government realized that we have been able to substantially clear the backlog acute housing shortage, and when we were ready to do some urban renewal. I was tasked to be the person to look into urban renewal. Of course, at that point of time, there were little or no information on urban renewal. None of the Asian cities had any experience or done anything substantial. European cities that did urban renewal were more for environmental improvement. Only UK and America were the countries that went in a big way. I was sent under the British Council Award to study in UK and the Ford Foundation to study in America. I found that in America they did the most and where I learned the most. What they had was a person with almost ministerial rights to do urban renewal. But unfortunately, their urban renewal, with all their intentions and financial power and expertise, went on the wrong footing. What I found out during my trip and study there was that urban renewal in America is actually a dirty word to many people, principally because they were accused of sending in the bulldozer and indiscriminately flattening in its path everything, including buildings worth conservation, nice landscape areas and so on. So it was very unpopular with the environmentalist group. Secondly, it was also blamed as a tool for racial segregation because the slum areas they went to happened to be mainly occupied by Afro-Africans, and that also did not go well. But finally, they thought they should also involve private participation, which they did. They cleared large tracts of land, but to get the private interested, which they realized they need to, instead of inviting tenders, they were accused of giving away land in a non-transparent manner and quite unfair to the public. And many of them were taken by people with influence or organizations with influence. Upon my return, government realized that we need to get help to do the work. So UNDP was approached. They sent the first expert from Europe, a man called Emil Lawrence, a very dedicated urban planner. And I was to work with him as the only person doing the survey. I was to shadow him and go into the program directly. After his job was to really assess whether Singapore is ripe for urban renewal. His 1 month or so in Singapore was a period where I was really inspired and learned a lot about our central area. We trammed the city center almost, the whole period we were here. We went to all corners of the central area to assess the situation and to see if we are really ready for urban renewal. He prepared a report which really recommended the Singapore government that we are now ready to do urban renewal. Upon that report, I was tasked to set up an urban renewal unit within HDB. It was essentially a one-man show with 2 assistants. This came about because following the first visit by UNDP, we approached UNDP for a second group of experts comprising 3 experts, Mr. Königsberger, who is an urban planner, Professor Charles Abrams, who is a land and legal expert, and Susumo Kobe, who is a transportation expert. The 3 of them spent about another month or so in Singapore, and their role was to really delineate the areas that we should go into urban renewal and how we should tackle it by fighting in piecemeal rather than in one go. So with that, I was able to get 2 more assistants to share with me to form the unit, and our role was to really identify areas to do urban renewal. not synchronized with what I have. Can I change it to the shot on the, anyway, it seems to be jumping. Is there somebody to come and help me change this size? The second shot is on the north one, I see. Sorry about that. So anyway, when the three-man team left Singapore, they did help us define the area for central area planning and the recommended precinct. Yes, this is the one. So the plan then was to do it in piece scale and to try and do it in bite sizes. Basically, the total area was defined by them. It's about 1.5 miles north of Singapore River, which is our job as a unit was to really go in depth to define the precincts that we should use first. The tactic was to start from the north and south, approaching from the extreme edges towards the city center or the river, which is the most densest and most difficult to operate. Now, in those areas, in the early days, our unit was to try. How do I change the slides? This one will. Anyway, in our survey, we located many slum areas. I will show you some of the slides of the areas that we went into. Now, at about that time, in our work, one of the key things, problems we faced was how to identify areas to improve. Here are some of the pictures of the slides. I'm sorry, the slides went astray. I think it's not synchronized. Yes. Here, I'd like to digress to talk about the slum conditions in Singapore. Now, immediately after the Second World War, I think Singapore's central area became, as most cities, the administrative and commercial center. It was a place which attracted a lot of in-migration from outside of the city center, as well as people from the south, Malaysia, China, and Singapore. Now, the British government at that point, after the Second World War, decided to set up what is known as the Rent Control Act, in the hope of trying to control the ever-increasing rentals. But unfortunately, that act backfired on them, because what it made was that owners felt it was not worth their while to do improvements. And the tenants found that they too had no reason to improve the properties, as they do not belong to them. There were no collateral, so what made things worse was that many of the tenants decided to subdivide their properties because they could rent it out easily and make more money, and nothing was done to the building. So here you see a situation where one building or one small structure, they actually house as many as 5 to 8 households. You can see from the number of stoves that were here. Now, many of them, the situation is so clever. In many of them, the stove will use more than once because there are not enough stoves for the number of households housed in this small unit. They take turns to use the stove. Now, of course, later on, much later on, we built alternative accommodation. Of course, this is a showpiece for the government. We never built that thing, that attractive places, much later to show to overseas visitors and so on. The great PR project. The people are more innocent those days. They lap up everything. These are some of the things. Shows that the area, because there was no control, squatters, developed all over the place. Here's one where a Mason Smith, has all these squatter buildings on no man's land, and they rear pigs and chickens and all that behind. So these are the conditions you face. Next is, this is a road that, was planned for a road. Within months, the squatters have come over and take over the whole lot, build shops, some of them illegally on both sides of the road. This is the situation that we faced in the early days where there were no proper control land use at all. Now this is another scene of public area. Now today you will find that we still see this scene this time of the year, Chinese New Year. Stalls, set up shops for the New Year festival. But then, today it's organized. Yes, that's right. Is it on? Thank you. Now today you find that it's organized and properly set up. But those days, disorganized as it appeared, but behind the scenes, it's very well organized. There's a great control, not by the government, but by the gangsters. Because nobody would dare to encroach into any of these stores that were pre-arranged and organized by the gangsters. It worked very well, although it's very dangerous. But no other people were there to do it because the control is made by the gangsters. So they have their own way and order, better than what the government can do in those days. This is a shot that, actually this is what we did. These were all the old buildings. This happened to be a larger one. In most cases, they're only about 2-story. Years later, when we cleared it, we built this is the People's Park Textile Center and a mall. Next to it is the OG building. Now, the situation of slums went way out all over the place. Here's an instance of sorry, I'm losing this again. Yes, this is in the Tomlinson Road. Where people used to build illegal structures, and when we cleared it, this became the Regent Hotel, the first John Portman design with nice atriums and bubble lifts and so on. Now this one here is a familiar site. This is just behind here, off Maxwell Road. This was a site just next to Andy Building. I remember those days the staff used to go early in the morning and buy fresh eggs still warm from the hatchery and get it very cheap. This was cleared because behind the wrought iron fence, this squatter built a lot of, had a little chicken coop and even reared pigs, and the staff used to get very fresh eggs in the morning, staying at MND. We cleared this, and this became the first head office of URA. We built our own head office. This is just to show the kind of situation we were in. Now, shortly after, in 1964, our role as a unit in URA to do mainly clearance projects in small scale became more important, and more work was involved. As a consequence, we were upgraded to an urban renewal department within HDB, still operating under the Housing and Development Board Act. The early attempts we did was, as I say from the chart, we tackled it from the extreme north and extreme south of the boundary. This is Precinct North 1 before, you know. Mainly, this is a more organized area than in the south. We have old buildings, not as badly squatted as in the south, but nonetheless, very bad condition. We came in here because many of the buildings, thanks to the 99 years leasehold end, they were about to end, and it was very easy for us to get in and take over the buildings and clear it. And these were the early attempts of the URA department when we tried to rehouse groups of people in North 1. This is the beginning of North 1, which is bounded by Crawford Road and Beach Road and New Bridge Road. Now, in the south, we were more fortunate. Incidentally, in 1966, when the department was formed, we also created a new Lands Acquisition Act, which enabled URA to press ahead to acquire land more readily. Now, in the south, we were a bit lucky. We had a prison, Outram Prison, just opposite the General Hospital. We had to persuade the prison authorities to give up this valuable land and for them to build a new prison in Cheong, which they accepted because it was quite obsolete, and more important, the land was too valuable to be used as a prison. With that big piece of land, we were very happy to be able to do a completely new project to house specifically people affected in South Precinct. Now, South Precinct comprised mainly the people, Chinese people, doing a lot of business and living more densely than in the North Precinct 1. And it was more difficult to clear. Now, in the early days of HDB clearance, we found that it was a very painful thing to clear families and businesses by scattering them all over the place. What we learned in detail in our walks around in the central area was that the system you saw in the early slide about the business community encroaching on the roads and so on, they have their order of doing things. Because firstly, all those poor people living in the south, in the slums in the south, they have a way of building community spirit based on trust. Many of the poor people working there, they will take goods on credit from all the small shopkeepers and so on, and they will only pay on payday. Implicit trust, no legal documents involved. And that worked very well. And everybody knew one another. So for instance, if you are a stranger walking there, everybody will know who you are and why you are there. You know, and the story is that in the early days, in my walking around to survey URA sites for development, actually my interest was also very much motivated by what I see, the lovely old things inside, which I like to acquire. And the story goes that my friends would tell me, Alan, don't come too often because prices go down and people get very angry because it's a sign that it's going to be acquired. And sometimes they even warn me that be careful, this is gangster territory. So all those are quite interesting experiences for me. But the key thing is that we found that clearing people and business is a very painful experience. And if we can, we should try everything to help ease their problem. And notwithstanding alternative accommodation, which we have to provide for them, and making them affordable. But the more important thing is to keep the community spirit alive. The people will feel a lot easier if their neighbors are there, the shopkeepers are there. So we had to think of new ways to build something that will work. The first problem is that the number of shops in the central area, they're all small fragmented shops, because in the early days when the planners built Singapore, they thought that the best way to give everybody frontage was to build them with about 18 to 20 foot frontage for shops. So they were all built in rows, and you have multiple owner, very fragmented. But nonetheless, there are lots of shops to be cleared. So when we cleared Precinct North 1, we, with a large piece of land, did something which we are quite happy and proud of. What we did was that we developed blocks of flats to house them. We also staggered the flats to make sure that we do create window views for people to see through, and it's quite functional. But more important is that at the ground level, in order to provide the number of shops that we have to make for the resettlement, we based the design on a series of landscape quadrangles or courts. This way, not only would the shop fronts be those on the road front and facing outside have shop front, we also created all those facing the internal landscape court to have valuable frontages. In fact, it works so well that if you stand anywhere in one corner of the internal courtyard, you can see the whole lot of shops there, and life is created. And we built a couple of stories. These are all interlinked. And we found that the resettlement was very well received, and we were very proud that for once we were able to do things with less pain to the affected families. Now, after this North one, we became more and more important our work. From the department, we did a lot of these works, and sales were started. We found that as we went along with our increased responsibilities, it was beginning to become quite difficult for us to operate under HDB rules and regulations. HDB's mission objective and priorities started to drift away from ours because we had different needs, different priorities. So this became increasingly difficult. Aside from our workload, we had the difficulty of fighting with HDB. Bearing in mind, at that time, HDB are our parent body, and Teh Chiang Wan, the chief architect then, was my senior, immediate senior. But nonetheless, the differences became apparent, and fortunately at that time, we have Mr. Eddie Barker as the minister, and Mr. Lim Kim Sang as the chairman, Hao Yun Chong as the CEO of HDB, and Teh Chiang Wan as the chief architect. Incidentally, all of them rose to become ministers subsequently. They're all heavyweights. For me at that time to deal with Teh Chiang Wan wasn't easy, but nonetheless, I had to do it. But fortunately, I had ministers and the chairman and CEO Hao Yun Chong. They had a soft ear, and they were prepared to listen and ask me to set up my own mission objective, what I had to do, what powers I need, and so on. This we did, and finally, after much difficulty, the Urban Renewal Authority was formed in 1974. Now, with the formation of the Urban Renewal Authority, the most important thing is that it gave us autonomous power and flexibility to do a lot of things which we wanted to do for comprehensive urban renewal, which included sale of sites besides assembling land, clearing land, and more important, promoting private sectors, more involvement in our projects. When we formed Urban Renewal Authority,
one of the main tasks was how do we reorganize the setup? We're doing completely different things. You see from the chart that the authority form, we created a whole series of new departments. These departments never existed when we were part of HDB because we weren't able to do the comprehensive job we were needed to do. So what we did was we started to reorganize the whole structure for URA, and you see that emphasis is placed on the admin department, which controls, amongst others, the legal department, the PR administration, and the learning and training program. The other important department which we put a lot of weight is the urban design and development, because that's where we show results to the public, and in it we have research, design, and so on. And of course, we had other departments, but the surprising department within this is the car parks division, because car park was never featured at all in our work when we were part of HDB. Now I found that at that time the car park came under the Ministry of National Development, and they built the Raffles Place under car park. But when we went to urban renewal in a comprehensive manner, I felt that car park is an integral part, important integral part of urban design, and we need to be able to select sites, control the amount of car park we need, and to select places to build car park properly, and also to build car park stations. But the main ulterior motive we had was the car park was a cash cow, because we had difficulty getting money. When we left HDB, one of the things they asked me was, how are you going to do it? You don't have the people, you don't have the finance, and in spite of your, very ambitious mission objective, it's not going to be easy. So we had to think of ways and means how to be independent, almost financially. What we got when we broke off was that the ministry told us, you can have it. After all the argument put forward, they said, okay, we'll let you have the car parks, because I said, look, at least give me the underground car park so I can get steady cash flow, which they did. But I know that the car park is going to make us lots of money, and with that, we actually did a lot of good. It helped us tremendously, because with independence of finance, we were able to go in and recruit something which we've always dreamed of, and a multitask, interdisciplinary skills group that complements one another to do the task of comprehensive urban renewal. And I was very happy that we were able to get dedicated people to join us, and we were able to from there take off. Now, after we had done urban renewal, I want to show you some of the projects we did, in the south. This is one of the projects we did in the south. I will go to it in greater detail later on. Now, in the past, about 60 years ago, 50, 60, in the 1960s, there were very few buildings of significance in Singapore. When we launched the sale, we had to think of ways and means, how do we get that impact? Because that was the most telling thing to persuade the private sector to come in. We realized that if we do piecemeal little projects, we're not going to create the impact we want and to draw overseas investors to come in. So what we did was that we started to aim and clear large parcels of land, assemble them, clear them, and identify the needs of the country at that time. So when we had a research department within the new URA, part of the job was to try and help us assess what are the needs of the country at that point of time. We work closely with Tourist Board and EDB and do our own research. Now, once we identify what is needed, we will select a site which we know would be suitable for such a project. So in the early sales, we went around doing that to select large parcels of land. To be fair to the early 1960s, no one was able to do large projects because the sites are all fragmented and heavily squatted with slums and so on. And it took a lot of guts and finance power to be able to do that. And none of the investors at that point of time dared to do it. Only URA can go in and buy large parcels of land, clear them, assemble them together, and prepare a large site capable of housing what we dream of. So People's Park was one of the early sites that we did. This is People's Park, you know, a great success. For the first time, we built a building that is a first in Singapore and perhaps in Asia, where it's a multi-purpose building with residence and a shop, big shopping, multi-complex with car park and so on. And we're quite proud of the building. This was one of the earliest buildings developed by Singapore architects. Mr. Xiao Chuan was one of the early members of the team that built this project, a very successful project. Now, I want to go back to try and talk to you about the 1960s where I sit. There were very few buildings of significance. You know, even the old 7-story hotel in Tan Quee Lam Street is an important landmark everybody recognizes because it's big enough, high enough, and we have very few buildings of that kind. So we wanted to do something really impactful. So what we did was that rather than to go for piecemeal, we went in for large parcels of land. We started off with People's Park Complex, a huge building which I described to you earlier. Now, the sales were also targeted at, as I say, what we need at that point of time to help our economic development. We knew that we needed hotels in Singapore at that time. So we generated this site for hotels. This is the Havelock Road area where before this development there was a disused oil mill, Huong oil mill, with some old warehouses. The oil mills has given up practice and we were able to move in, take over the site and clear it. But when we started to mount this first sale with 3 hotels in a row, none of the investors that I saw could figure out why did I want to do that. What they told me was, are you not making a serious mistake? I will tender provided I'm the only hotel. And I do not want to say this will be cutting into one another. I just cite to them example of Singapore. I said, have you forgotten about the old Victoria Street, which was a furniture center for Singapore, Milder Road, a shoe center for Singapore and so on, and a textile center in parts of Chinatown? I said that if I have 3, you will complement one another and you will create an impact. It was an extremely difficult sale to try and get 3 hotelers to come in and build. But fortunately, we were successful, and the mission objective to give people an idea that what we sell, we carry out and it can be successful, and that putting them as a grouping would be successful. And I'm glad that the 3 hotels is not recycled, it's still there today. Now, next, I want to also describe about next, I'd like to talk about very quickly how we also did for the second sale. which was to create a much needed financial center for Singapore. So this we did by clearing the warehouses at Shenton Way and made Shenton Way in a financial center for Singapore. And all these buildings, we started with UIC, Robina House, and this Shenton House. And of course, across the road, we had Shin Kwan House, and it was a successful demonstration of Singapore's attempt doing a big project, which tactically helped us to sell to the world. Incidentally, the interesting thing was that in the first sale, the developers were all Singaporean, but in the second sale, all these developers were non-Singaporeans. So we knew we have achieved our objective of showing to the world that it's a worthwhile place to invest in Singapore, and we can do things which they know will make them profit. So UIC was by Taiwan, this soap maker, soap powder maker. Robina was by Robin Low, who did most of the business in China and Indonesia. And the Shin Kwan house behind this was built by S.P. Tao, a man who's never gone into property development. And I was able to persuade him to build Shin Kwan House, his first foray into real estate. I just met him about 2 months ago, 97 years old, still in real estate, and blaming me for getting him into real estate, which he's never turned back. He went many real estates. Anyway, I'm running short of time. I will next go to show you. The next area we create with impact is the Golden Mile. This is the Merlin Hotel. This is the Merlin Hotel, renamed Pan Pacific, and this is Golden Mile, and of course Choe building. The second sale, this is one of the sale. I think it's the third. I think it's the second or third sale. This is mainly concentrated on hotels and so on. But in the background, you see we have started reclamation of Marina Center, which was needed very much by us to claim more land for future development and to basically create an expressway to bypass the heavy traffic in Singapore along Shenton Way and other parts. I have to raise the sorry. Then we went on to do the Golden Shoe, where we built piecemeal, and this was one of the sales. This is the International Plaza, one of the tallest buildings in Singapore at that time. Also, OCBC head office. There are lots of stories on each of these, but I have no time to tell the interesting story behind these buildings. And of course, later on we went into doing even Mount Elizabeth Hospital is one of the projects we sold. And of course, finally when we went into depth, we realized that conservation is an important part of urban renewal, and we did several of them. This is Capish Road, Toloya Avis, and parts of Basora Street, and also, of course, we did some of the other buildings. But important thing is that arising out of the conservation effort, a preservation of monument spot was formed, and with powers to designate buildings and sites for conservation. Incidentally, one of the most important lessons we learned was, which helped our publicity a great deal, was to build a model nobody had thought about at that time, because it was something which we had to really do to educate the public and to show to the people what we can do. And that helped with our publicity program in a very big way. And was that each time a developer comes into the area, we will insist that they give us a scale model to put in the exact place where the building is. So when we try to sell sites, it was easy to demonstrate to people where the development is and how it forms part of our urban renewal program. Now I'm running a very short of time. I have a lot more to tell, but let me conclude by saying that what I told you is something which may not interest you as much as the speakers to come. I can't give you tips on where to go the property market, which I know many of you will be looking forward to Philip. But I assure you that it's a story of where we came from, how we started, and of course it's useful for the younger generation to know, the kind of living standards we came out from and how we did our small part to get urban renewal and urban development going. But I think the good thing I'm most encouraged is that each successive team of URA architects were able to build on and improve greatly. So today you see much better projects than what was projected there. And I know that in the future you'll see a lot more exciting projects. So I know that I'd like to wish the new URA team and CLC all the best. Thank you very much for your patience.
May we now invite Mrs. Koh on stage, please. And Happy New Year. I would like to thank Teng Chai for inviting me to share my recollection of my 34 years journey at URA. However, given only 15 minutes, I have decided to keep to time. Maybe I'll stick to 17 minutes. I have decided to cover only 4 key topics. The first one is Marina Bay, and I'll move on to conservation. I'll briefly touch on architecture, urban design excellence, and my role as chief planner from 01 to 08. Now, to me, planning is a continuous journey of dreams and aspirations, and having the passion, commitment, conviction, and energy to turn dreams into reality. After graduating as an architect in 71, I work in a private practice, make sure I get registered with a board of architects before I joined URA. So in 94, I responded to Alan's call, aggressively advertised in the newspaper to embark on a bold program to comprehensively redevelop Central area. So I applied to join URA and he accepted me. And in 75, the first 2 assignments given to my boss, Alan Choe then, the founding GM of URA, he was the CEO of URA, was to review the reclamation profile for Marina South and the final alignment of the ECP in consultation with HDB and PWD engineers. Well, I did not imagine then I would continue the journey over the next 34 years, spending half of my life. I retired in 08. Now, I lead a team of architects and planners to continuously review and revise the master plan of Marina Bay repeatedly over time to adapt to inevitable changes in economic and market conditions, lifestyle and technology trends as well. My core team of architects during the initial periods from 92 was a very small group. Included William Ong, Michael Koh, and Man Hoi. We worked under the strong leadership of Goh Hap Choe. He was seconded from HDB to join URA from 82 to 96. And Dr. Liu Taiker in his capacity as CEO of URA from 89 to 92. Prior to 89, Taiker was URA's board member.
and very often Hap Chua would tap his wisdom and invaluable inputs whenever he was present at URA. Now a few words on Tiger. He's very visionary, lots of wisdom, he's tough, demanding, but those of us who had worked with him mature overnight. 3 years is like 9 years. I learned a lot from him, a lot of wisdom. So you have to accept the toughness, then you can learn. And in between his other meetings, he will scribble notes and pass to me so that I can quickly follow up to act on it, and in particular on conservation. Now, other architects who joined the team in the late 90s included Siu Ling, David, Andrew Fasam, Choe, Levy, Bernard Litzen, Lyndon Lee. I mention these names because I'm very happy that some of them are still in URA continuing with their good work. Now, it is a wonderful feeling for me that I'm still around to see the realization of the plans, and in particular to visit and enjoy the development and activities that has taken shape around Marina Bay. In the interest of time, I will just highlight 4 key milestones. In 1983, 2 of the well-known urban designers of that time, IMK and Kenzo Tange, were engaged by URA to come up with separate urban design proposals for central area. Subsequently, Pei's proposal was adopted for further study. In 1987, our PM Lee Kuan Yew then envisioned Marina Bay as a lake city of the future in 1987. At an interview, he said, it was reported in the newspaper and I still have the cutting. In 20 years, it is possible there could be breakthroughs in technology, both anti-pollution and filtration. Then we can dam up or put a barrage at the mouth of the marina, the neck that joins the sea, and we will have a huge water lake. A lake city of the future. Now in 2004, we are beginning to realize our reservoir, a huge lake. PUB submitted its development proposal for a marina barrage building. And you can guess what was the original design. Well, as expected, being a utility building, it was a standard typical utility box building, both efficient and functional. However, given the strategic location, it was not acceptable to URA. We hence decided to seek approval from Minister Ma, who was then Minister M&D, for the project to be referred to a design advisory panel for review. At the first DAP review, as a chairperson, I told PUB engineers that DAP would like to wish the box to disappear. We then showed them a number of ways that the building can be redesigned. So on site today, you can visit and enjoy the beautiful, delightful barrage building with a visitor center, I think including overseas delegation and tourists. The timing was good, as Teng Chai had been appointed as the CEO of PUB then. And he fully understood URA's concern and was able to accommodate the DAP suggestion by increasing the budget a little bit more. Now in 2003, Teng Chai, as MD of Temasek Special Project Unit, was tasked to devote his attention to the Business Financial Center project in downtown Marina Bay. He was given the tough job of marketing and consultancy work for downtown business and financial center, with Michael Koh assisting him over at Temasek and Maple Tree. In the same year, Teng Chai sought URA's agreement to engage American consultancy, Skidmore, Owning and Mirrors, SOM, to critique and review URA's master plan for Marina Bay. 4 key ideas were proposed by SOM and were subsequently adopted and incorporated in URA's 2003 statutory master plan. Now, the first key idea was the further refinement of the brick road network such that it allows flexible parcellation plan. You can then either sell the land in smaller parcel or bigger parcel as the time goes by. But I do hope as we move on, we do not just keep building large parcels of development. We need to have fine grain as well. Now, the second was a cultural necklace of public attractions around the bay, proposed by SOM, which would serve as unique features of a city and a source of pride for the whole community. So you can see it taking shape slowly. Now third was to move the tallest twin towers proposed by IMP at the waterfront, away from the waterfront, to achieve a more human-scale environment along the public promenade. In fact, I remember Philip Ng's father, Ng Teng Fong, came to URA and saw the model of the twin tower. And he told my minister, I want that site. Now, finally, the fourth was the creation of distinctive districts and address location with the introduction of two major open spaces, the lawn and the square. I remember one of my young architects was very worried when he saw SOM's proposal, because much land was set aside for the lawn and the square. He was concerned that we will get a knock on our head. So I told him that if we as professionals agree that it is a necessity to have major green lungs within densely high-rise environment, we should not fear to champion. Well, the lawn and the square were approved and reflected in the 2003 statutory master plan. On site today, part of the lawn has been implemented between the Business Financial Centre and the sale. I will now move on quickly to recollect my long journey of championing the conservation of heritage buildings. Well, as you have seen Alan's slide, and many of you are aware, those who are younger may not be aware, when we began our urban renewal efforts in the late 60s, the emphasis was clearance of slums and squatters. 2, provision of public housing. 3, construction of infrastructure at a rapid pace. The primary concern then was to transform the city into a modern, efficient center for business, finance, and tourism. Well, that meant tearing down old buildings and putting up new ones quickly. So URA went to a 15-year phase of merrily demolishing old buildings with only a few isolated attempts at conservation. By the early 80s, a group of passionate URA architects, myself as the head of urban design, and my team members comprising of William Ong, Keng Wee Bin, Tam Wong Heng, Tan Keng Ling, Goh So Mui, Chow Fong Ling, Lo Chui Lai, together with Koh Hap Choe, but I'm sad to say they are all no longer in URA. So together with Koh Hap Choe and our immediate supervisor, Liu Tai Ke, in his capacity as board member, observed that our city was losing its identity, and that there was an urgent need to integrate the conservation of our built heritage as part of city planning. So that was the start of conservation. We also observed that preservation and conservation of isolated monuments and buildings in itself was not enough to create a city with its own identity and character. We felt that it was critical to retain entire historic districts with their rich history, architectural style, and ambience. Only then can the city come alive and assert its individuality. So in 82, when the government decided to proceed with an MRT railway system, under the strong leadership of Hap Choe, the team quickly seized the opportunity to carry out a comprehensive review for the central area. We thus prepared an urban design structure plan for the city centre. The plan recommended suitable locations for high-density, high-rise developments along the MRT route and MRT stations, the conservation of significant historic districts, and hill parks as lungs for the city centre. This led to the formation of the 1985 structure plan, which was adopted to guide the growth of a central area over the next 2 decades, but it was reviewed and massaged continuously. Now, come mid-80s, things began to change rapidly. This change was probably brought about by 4 key factors, which fortunately took place around the same time. It gave the URA's architects, planners, and policy makers the confidence to proceed with conservation on a comprehensive scale. Now, in the interest of time, I will skip these 4 key factors. We can discuss during panel discussion. Now, fortunately, in fact, the historic districts were under rent control. And although the precinct plan that Alan showed earlier on, they were all supposed to demolish, but rent control held them back, and we jumped in timely. Now, after 3 years of hard work from 1982 to 85, Hap Choe roped in Peng Chai to help craft several policy papers for submission to the government. As you know, Ting Chai is a president scholar, he can write well. We architects cannot write well, you know. So it was a great help to us. We just draw, you know. And as you know, Ting Chai was CEO and Chief Planner of URA from 92 to 96. We had a good time working with him. Finally, in 1985, we started 82, and in 85, we obtained the government's approval to conserve 10 historic districts. But the story does not end there, because in between another 4 years, URA had to hard sell and convince the owners of shophouses the importance and value of conservation. So it was only in 89 that we have the area protected under the URA Act. So the whole journey took 7 years, and it continued. Now, having obtained the government's approval to conserve 10 historic districts, it was not enough to us. We wasted no time and continued to rework several areas that we identified earlier as significant, but we were unable to obtain approval to conserve. These street blocks were located at locations adjacent to new high-rise developments, and hence the loss of development potential was an issue. So over a period of another trying 3 years, 89 to 92, we worked hard and worked smart to search for alternative solutions. Our happy hours from 6 to 9 p.m. was not at the park. It was in the office. And I think Chanyan is here. She was a member of the conservation team. She can remember that. We will brainstorm, rework, and then, wow, we came up with a creative win-win solution of an integrated old and new approach. Those you see now happening in Liangxia Street, Purvis Street, Geylang, Chuchet. Because we feel that this approach do not require to conserve the entire building because they are located immediately in front of high-rise development. So this approach requires only the front main building to be conserved, and the rear service block can be demolished and redeveloped to a height that does not compromise the scale of the building to be conserved and as viewed from the street. So this approach allows majority of a property to realize its full development potential. Now, while this approach seems simple at first glance, implementing this approach meant that we had to carry out detailed simulations for each and every one of the 1,900 shophouses to test what is the maximum gross floor area, GFA, achievable. You know, in those days, the developer owners only talk about GFA. Give me more GFA. Now, this was done to ensure that majority of the units would be able to realize the allowable GFA so that they can be happy to conserve. So finally, after 1,900 simulations later, in 1992, we obtained the government's approval to conserve an additional 5 areas. Later on, we applied this same approach to other heritage areas. Now in 82, we also carried out extensive studies for properties along the Singapore River and recommended the conservation of shophouses at Boat Quay and Clarke Quay. Since Boat Quay and Clarke Quay are sited at prime locations, we have difficulty obtaining approval to conserve them. Why? This is because if we demolish all the shophouses at Boat Quay, for example, we could build at least another 3 OCBC buildings. And similarly at Clarke Quay. So after several rounds of failed presentation to our bosses, we decided at the final round of presentation, try our luck, to photograph close-up details of the beautiful decorative elements of the shophouses and warehouses, so that our bosses can appreciate why we're saying we should conserve them. We mount them on cardboards and line the briefing room with a lot of these beautiful, colorful panels. In those days, we do not have the advantage of computer cut and paste, so we have to painfully photograph, mount them, etc. And I remembered Mr. Yang Tong Dao, who was the PS of M&D then. As he walked into the briefing room, he made a comment. So, you are using pretty pictures to convince us. And well, we did succeed. For Clarke Quay, we highlighted to our bosses that we should protect the current view where one could see the river from Fort Canning Hill and vice versa. Hence, even if we were to demolish the old buildings for new developments, we would have to control the height of the new buildings to be of similar height as the conservation buildings. With that, we succeed in convincing Minister Mr. Danabaran. I met him 2 nights ago at the SSO Orchestra, and he told my husband, your wife is the one who did conservation. So I say, no, Minister, you're the one. He said, all I did was to nod my head. And I did, he nod his head for Clarke Quay. Now in '85, we unveiled the URA's master plan in a comprehensive way. We staged an exhibition to show the public what is the whole plan all about. But we decided not to impose any deadlines for owners to restore the buildings, because we prefer to leave the pace to the title holders. The only exception where we imposed deadlines for owners to commence and complete restoration works was at Boat Quay. The imposition of the deadline was necessary as the government had spent substantial resources to clean up the river over a period of 10 years. That's the challenge given by PM Lee Kuan Yew then. Now, given the very prime CBD location, there was an urgent need to rejuvenate Boat Quay with renewed activities. I remember having to personally meet all the 117 owners through many trying sessions over a period of 6 years to personally persuade them to restore their buildings. The owners were mainly old Teochew-speaking businessmen who had been operating their warehouses for decades and would like to continue their business as it is. It was by no means an easy task for a young lady architect then, but fortunately, being young, I was able to endure the harsh words from the owners. And finally, we managed to convince them on the potential, and all the 117 shophouses were restored after 6 years. The cost of conservation in Singapore has not been an easy one. We see them all on site now, we think it just happened overnight. But those of us who are involved, we know we need to have a high degree of passion and perseverance. Never give up. There were many problems after we gazette them to resolve as well. So in the interest of time, I will not elaborate here. Our effort was finally rewarded in 2006. The conservation program won the ULI Asia Pacific and Global Awards for Excellence. I would like to read you the ULI jury statement. In a rapidly modernizing country, Singapore has established a model conservation program to preserve its rich heritage of vernacular building and colorful neighborhoods. Using a collaborative approach involving government organizations, the public, the developers, the island republic's URA has achieved a balance between free market economics and cultural conservation. Looking back, I must confess that the Singapore conservation journey over the initial 20 years was a combination of both joy and pain, with some very real personal sacrifice. I remember a conversation I had with my son when he was only 10 years old. I told him that I was sorry for not being able to spend more time with him because of the long hours that I have to stay in the office to work on the conservation. Guess what was his response? He told me that it is okay and he had long since to be independent. So you can imagine how stunning this was coming from a 10-year-old and how it was a cause for some worry on my part. But thankfully, he's now 35 and reassuringly embarking on his own journey to success with passion and perseverance at the United Nations office in Geneva on human rights. He wants to save the world, not just save conservation. Now, 14 years ago, he sent me a birthday card with a conservation shop house on the front. On the inside of the card was a moving handwritten note saying, "Dear Mummy, each time I walk past a shop house with all its flair, color and vibrancy, my thoughts are on you warmly and proudly." Well, so that made me feel all the years of time and effort that I spent with my team championing and turning conservation plans into reality has been worth it. I must say we were very fortunate to have Mr. Danabaran as National Minister from 84 to 92, I hope I got the date correct, and subsequently Mr. Mahautan as National Development from 96 to 2011. Without them, you will not see so much in Singapore happening today. It's all through their effort They were both very supportive and gave the professionals the space to perform their work. In 1996, B.G. Tam Kim Siew was appointed as the CEO and Chief Planner to succeed Ting Chai. He was from the MINDEF, and we architects were rather concerned. We wondered how we're going to work with him. But it so turned out our fear was unfounded. He was a wonderful boss with high IQ and EQ, extremely sharp and efficient. He gave us the professionals necessary space to dream and to perform, and he provided invaluable inputs to our proposals. He said he will only interfere when he feels it's politically sensitive. Now, in 2001, just before Kim Siew was to be promoted as PS MINDEF, MNDs decided to split the job of the URA and Chief Planner into two separate jobs. I was appointed as the Chief Planner in 2001, and Kim Siew said to me, now you can go do all the plans that you have wanted to. So to me, the major challenge then was being able to contribute towards the MND's mission of a home for our people, a global city of distinction. And URA's mission was to make Singapore a great city in which to live, work and play. And this is against a diverse backdrop of economic, social, political, as well as aesthetic considerations. I needed to resolve competing demands, conflicts of interest, varied objectives of different government agencies and the private sector. I needed to achieve a win-win solution by maintaining objectivity, balancing views, receptivity to new ideas and new ways of doing things. I led a team, 100 strong professionals and 200 technical staff, and I have to continuously inspire and motivate my team to innovate and deliver high-quality creative products, excellent customer service, as well as keeping abreast of the latest trends, needs, and developments in other cities. I think some part of Tiger has rubbed onto me, so I was an equally demanding boss. So in 2001, I began to identify programs that URA should undertake for 2003 Master Plan Review. Together with my team, we mooted several initiatives to enhance the quality of the physical environment and quality of life, as well as strengthening the identity of the island. Two sets of plans were prepared and adopted as key layers of the 2003 Master Plan. First layer, Parks and Water Bodies Plan. The aim was to bring the Singapore Garden City to the next phase as City in a Garden. The key was to heighten the sense of green and islandness. The plan proposed an island-wide network of green, connecting parks and water bodies with residential and commercial areas. The comprehensive network of green serves to enhance accessibility to the natural environment and attempts to see how nature can be woven into the built environment, resulting in a comfortable and unique tropical live-work-play environment. Nature areas were recognized and acknowledged as a layer to the 2003 Statutory Master Plan for the first time. The second layer was the Identity Plan. It was not about conservation, it was about how to give a helping hand. Over the years, good planning, urban design, and the conservation of historic districts have enriched our cityscape and given it a uniquely Singaporean identity. The issue of how to retain places with a sense of history and memory and identity continue as an increasingly important focus in planning for Singapore, and I believe even more so now. In 2001, we saw the need to take stock and review our development strategy, going beyond conservation, to see how we can give a helping hand to retain the charm and character of certain places that have evolved over time and which holds a special place within the hearts of the local community. The plan is a land use plus plan. It combines ideas and proposals on how to keep and enhance special character of places with land use planning as part of the master plan review. Our aim was to ensure that such places will not be wittingly destroyed as we progress. So 15 areas were identified and grouped into 4 clusters. The first cluster was Old Chang, Balestier, Tanjong Katong, Jalan Besar, Chu Chiat, and East Coast Road. The second cluster was urban villages, Anak Bukit, Jalan Leban, Thompson Village, Springleaf and Coronation areas. The third was rustic close, Punggol, Coney Island, Changi Village, Pasir Ris, Pulau Ubin. And I'm happy that we managed to save the part of the old Punggol Road in time in 2003. I managed to convince the PUB and HDB engineers not to change Punggol River into a concrete canal. They told me they need more land at the MP's Master Plan Committee meeting for soft edges. So I told them as a chief planner, I will help them to champion for the additional land. So they had the land and we have a beautiful river now. The last cluster was southern ridges and hillside villages, includes Gilman Moss Road area. 2 bridges were proposed to connect the Mount Faber ridges, Henderson and Alexander Arch. Now you can walk 9 kilometers, ridge to ridge, admire the panoramic views of the city and enjoy quiet retreats on the hilltop. Now briefly, a few words on establishment of Architecture and Urban Design Excellence Program. Yong Soon came over after Kim Siu left. Yong Soon was appointed as the BG Tan Yong Soon was appointed as the CEO of URA. We observed the need to promote and elevate the architectural profession to generate better awareness of the role and contribution of our local architects in nation building. We therefore established the Architecture Urban Design Excellence Program and initiatives. I will just mention 2 of them. The first one is a book and an exhibition launch we called 20 Under 45. It showcased the works of 20 young architects under 45 years old registered in Singapore. The program aimed to raise awareness and promote Singapore as a city that is home to talents and well-designed buildings. As a result, the 20 architects are now well known beyond Singapore. They are doing big projects now instead of small little bungalows. The second one was an international design competition. We staged many competitions during that time to give opportunity for the private sector to come forward with ideas. One of them I like to mention is the first public housing project at Duxton. You know, the whole judging was anonymous, and we were also delighted when we opened the envelope. It was a local, small husband and wife practice, and they did a wonderful job. So we do have talents in Singapore. And in May, Yong Soon was promoted to PS Environment. Koon Hian returned to URA from M&D to succeed Yong Soon as the CEO. We were all delighted and welcomed Koon Hian because she's also an architect planner by training, and we hence can speak the same language. And in addition, she brought with her wealth of knowledge while she was serving M&D and MTI. So she was holding key portfolio at M&D in particular. And she also possesses strong passion and interest. So we all enjoyed working with her, and we had great fun. Of course, long hours though. So 2006, I turned 62 and I was supposed to retire, but my minister said, no, you stay till 2008. So I agreed and accepted. So during my last 2 years, my team and I reviewed and updated the 2003 statutory master plan. Another major exhibition was staged, but now URA, did stage 1, but not too many exhibitions. The plan has 4 key thrusts. 1 is to enhance Singapore as a home of choice. 2, magnet for business. 3, offer an exciting playground. And 4, continue to focus on identity, creating Singapore as a home to cherish. To strengthen Singapore as a distinctive global business hub, the master plan offers a wide choice of attractive business locations supported by amenities infrastructure to meet the future needs, such as downtown Marina Bay, Tanjong Pagar Beach Road, and in particular mixed-use hubs at Jurong Lake District, Kallang Side River, and Paya Lebar. Now for Jurong, my team decided to attempt an urban design proposal for all the undeveloped land around the lake. And we said to ourselves, we have a wonderful lake. We shall no longer name Jurong as Jurong, but rather as the Jurong Lake District. And I'm happy that the image and perception of Jurong has now taken on a new dimension. The other layer of key plan was a new island-wide leisure plan. Now, one of the key highlights is a 150 km round island route. The round island route consists of linear park connectors, pathways, coastal promenades, trails, and other connections to bring people closer to the coastline and greenery. I think I will skip this part now and go into my concluding remarks. Looking back, I have been very fortunate and privileged to have the opportunity to serve in one of the most exciting government agency, URA, for 34 years, involved in the process of envisioning and translating plans into reality. Now, to me, it is a privilege as well as a heavy responsibility to help translate the needs and aspirations of our people into plans, and subsequently for realization on site. However, working together as a large team, both public and private sector, we can create innovative solutions that will benefit all Singaporeans in perpetuity. To me, the first 2 decades in particular, 60s to 80s and to late 80s, were a period of optimism, experimentation, and the can-do spirit as we tackle the challenges of a modern, dynamic global city. I would like to end by appealing, one, to the younger generation of architects who are talented and who have a strong passion for planning, urban design, and conservation works. Please join the URA team. The making of Singapore will be work in progress in many more decades to come. And I can assure you, you will have a nice, wonderful 34 years journey. Now, my second appeal is to the URA team. Please keep up with the URA spirit of can do, fear not, and never give up, and stay on to continue the march. Thank you.
Conservation and land use planning in Singapore. Would now like to invite Dr. Cheong on stage, please. Thank you.
Wow, you're very patient, huh? So you keep repeating history, and I'm going to keep repeating history. But given that Wen Jin and I, we had a lot of fun together working in URA, you will find that quite a lot of things that I have to say, we might overlap a little bit. So I'm going to skip my notes, and I'm going to take you on a more visual journey of what we've done. And the period I took on is from 89 to 2013. I'll tell you what's so significant about 1989. In this transformation journey for Singapore. And really planning is about building on the shoulders of pioneers like Alan and Wen Jin, honestly. If they didn't lay the foundation, we couldn't do many of the things that we really wanted to do. Okay, now let me see if I can get this to work. Okay, really, to understand the urban transformation journey for the last 20 years, or actually beyond the last 20 years, to 1971, we can look at it through the lens of the concept plan, which is a long-term physical development plan for Singapore. Of course, as Alan mentioned, 1971 was one of the first concept plans we had, where we did it with the UN, and it had a very simple structure with a ring of high-density towns around the central water catchment. And really, this plan laid the foundation for new towns, transport infrastructure, parks and recreational spaces. And we were planning for about 4 million people ultimate. But to me, 1989 is a really milestone year for planning. Why is that so? Because from there we had subsequent 3 more concept plans. Because it was the year that we had a very key institution change. And what was this change? It was the merger of really 3 institutions and 1 unit from MND. It was the merger of the URA, which was the Urban Redevelopment Authority, looking at central area planning, conservation and urban design, with the planning department that dealt with strategic planning, the development control under PWD, which really dealt with private sector approvals, and the RSU, which is the research and statistical unit in MND. Now, why is this significant? Because for the first time, it merged strategic planning conservation, urban design, and real estate expertise in Singapore. The concept plan 1971 really was unable to deal with rapid growth, and the existing master plan we had then was just a collection of planning decisions. But from 1991 onwards, the plans were forward-looking and very comprehensive because we integrated island-wide and central area planning. And the planning and regulatory intentions became much better aligned. Remember, they were in two different organizations, but now they were merged. And development control guidelines, which developers are very familiar with, were then now aimed at achieving broader planning goals and not just being prescriptive. It meant that the plans became much more transparent because people understood now what were the long-term land use intentions. They were made very explicit. There was greater certainty for developers and the public, and this really expedited development application approval. And it also meant that it was the beginning of a much more open and consultative environment. So post-1989, we would always do the concept plan every 10 years because the concept plan had a planning horizon of 30 to 40 years. And in between, we would do a master plan, which is a much more detailed plan with a planning horizon of about 15 years, and that's done every 5 years. The only exception we made was 2006, that we did a concept plan midterm review, which was an internal plan, but we did not, of course, make that public. Now, I'm just going to go through very quickly the different concept plans and what it each focused on, some of which would overlap with what Wen Jing had to say, so I will go through it rather quickly. 1991 plan, we had the theme of Towards a Tropical City of Excellence. It's a very long-term forward-looking plan, and I call this a milestone plan because it really integrated land use transport with land use with transportation planning, with a lot of focus on the public transport domain. It also was intended to facilitate the growth of high-tech industries and better living to meet aspirations, with a planned population of 4.4 million. The entire vision really was encapsulated in this book. It's a little bit blurred. Why do I want to show this book? Like Wen Jing, I have a story to tell. All the mothers in URA have stories to tell. Because I was in the MND then and was helping to draft and to edit this book. And this book actually became the government's agenda for the next future of the physical development of Singapore. Why was it memorable to me? Because it was the time when I gave birth to my second son. I was in the hospital. And the MND staff brought the book to me to edit on the day that my second son was born. And I remember it clearly, 28th of November. Why? Because I was watching TV in the hospital and Mr. Goh Chok Tong became the Prime Minister. So all the mothers have stories to tell in URA. Now, this plan started the concept of the decentralization strategy because the central area was building up. We knew Singapore had to grow, so we were planning for many commercial centers to be spread out in a constellation concept, very well served by public transport. And of course, that was the beginning of regional centers, the sub-regional centers, and the fringe centers. At that time, we planned for 4 regional centers. Another very key idea was that of 2 technology corridors, one along the southwest and another one along the northeast. As a result of this idea, we started the idea of business parks. At the time, we didn't even know what were business parks. I still remember some study trips when we looked at business parks. And it was to merge areas like Jurong Industrial Estate with synergies with NUS, and subsequently with One North being located there, and the Science Park. So pretty much this technology corridor has taken place, but the Northeast has not. And if you notice in URA's recent concept plan 2011, they reintroduced again North Coast Innovation Corridor. So maybe that will take off in the next couple of years. Another key idea, we've been talking about Marina Bay ever since the day I think Alan was already the GM. But finally, by 1991, we were still talking about it, and we talked about city extension into Marina Bay. But it was also the time when the idea of merging a few islands together to form Jurong Island was mooted, and that took place arising from this plan. And of course, we paid a lot of attention to the road and the rail network because we were spreading the commercial centers away from the city area. So road and rail networks were planned in great detail. Now, after the 1991 concept plan, we had to prepare for Master Plan 1998. And it was the first time that the Singapore island was divided into 5 regions with great detailed planning of 55 development guide plan areas. First time that we did in great detail. And Ellen, you will be pleased to know that not only during your era you walk every street, because during this time, so did the young planners then. And I remember we had to do it because we had very little planning data. So we literally walked every street recording what was on the street for 55 of the planning areas. And in fact, those 55 DGPs formed the basis for Master Plan 1998. The first time that the Master Plan was done in such great detail. By 2001, I think we were very mindful of global competition for investment and talent. So there was a lot of focus on attracting investments, and particularly to build up the business and financial center. So there was a lot of refocusing in the central area. I still remember Wen Jin. I think Wen Jin was very much involved in trying to refocus things back because the banks really wanted to be in the central area. So we refocused back into the central area more and reduced the number of regional centers from 4 to 3. And there was a great focus on quality of life and identity, as mentioned by Wen Jin. And by then, we were planning for a population of 5.5 million. In 2001, I think there was a lot of push now to move into Marina Bay. And it became our icon for the signature global city image. All right, I was in M&D then, and I remember it was not easy to get Marina Bay off the ground because in 2003 we had SARS and it was during an economic downturn. So it's not easy to convince people to start Marina Bay. It was also a time that we introduced these more flexible zones. One is called the New White Zone and the B1 and B2 industrial zones. I won't go into the technicalities, but it really allowed for a lot more flexible land use planning for both businesses as well as for industries. And as Wen Jin has mentioned, there was a lot of emphasis on greenery. So many of the plans spawned from this idea because there was increasing densities and planners were concerned and we had to mitigate these high densities. So we introduced plans like the green and blue plan, the leisure plan. So we take leisure really seriously in Singapore. And also the parks and the park connector plans. In Concept Plan 206, it was an internal plan. This was within the 10-year period. Within 5 years, we had to do another one because there was so much social and economic changes and we had to review our plans. And at that time, it spawned ideas about sustainable development. And it was a time that we went on to develop the new growth areas, the detailed plans at, for example, Kallang, Jurong Lake District and Paya Lebar. And these were subsequently exhibited in Master Plan, I think, 2008. Concept Plan 2011. I'm no longer in the URA, but if I may, looking at the URA plans and many of my colleagues in the audience, I call it a plan which talks about a livable city with room for growth. And it talked a lot about more affordable homes, city in the garden with more extended connectors, round island routes, enhanced transport connectivity because there were now more rail lines and cycling routes, and further grow the Paya Lebar, Jurong, and the Kallang areas that were planned in the 2000s, and reintroduction of new innovations for room for growth, and again renewed emphasis on identity. And now the planning parameter that was used was about for 6.5 to 6.9 million population. Now, that is a real snapshot and a journey of where we are for the last 25 years. What were the planners faced with? Basically, I think planners throughout the ages were faced with very similar issues. One is we were faced with land constraints. Second, we needed to keep Singapore attractive and competitive economically. Third, we have to keep addressing population growth and demographic changes. And I think the latest master plans, for example, look at an aging population. At the same time, we really have to meet aspirations for good quality of life and to mitigate the very high density environment. So what were the key strategies and paradigm shifts that took place? First, I think planners really had to plan and pursue a very bold vision. So many of the plans had very bold vision. And it's really not easy because for Marina Bay, for example, how do you convince the government to set aside 100 hectares for a garden? That is really not very easy. There was a lot of persuasion needed. And how do you get money to start and move into Marina Bay when we had an economic downturn? Nobody believed in us, and I still remember putting up many papers and going to Ministry of Finance 3 times before I got the money to build the infrastructure. Fortunately, we did. Now, and as I said, it's about bold vision for planning of new areas and new ideas, the Jurong Lake District. Maybe just to add to Wen Jin's story, I still remember the discussion we had, and we said, who's going to go to Jurong? Nobody's going to go to Jurong, you know, it's sooty and it's dirty. Then of course we had the lakes. But we had this romantic, or I had this romantic notion at that time that we all love the Lake District in the UK. So we wanted to keep the name of Jurong because that is social memory, but we wanted the romanticism of the Lake District. So it became Jurong Lake District, and obviously all the developers believed in us and bought land there. All right, and also Kallang. Kallang was very interesting because the Bugis plan was really about a debate about the sports stadium. And the inside story is this, that it was a debate about economics versus social memory. Because to put the sports hub in very prime land is something that is a very big decision in Singapore. We almost moved it to the north, somewhere in Seletar, you know. But after a lot of debate, I think we managed to convince decision makers that the social memory was very important. You cannot have a Kallang Raw in Seletar. And so that determined the location, and we're all much happier, right? Yes. Okay. Now, we have to be very innovative. Singapore is very tiny, you know. We are smaller than the metropolitan area of Sydney or London. But how do you create space? So we had to create virtual space, you know. And so ideas like park connectors, anything linear always seems to be bigger, right? Because you're cycling very far. If you cycle within a park, or if you cycle connecting park to park, it's a lot of difference. So the park connector ideas came about for many years, 20 years ago, before slowly it has now taken off. And Wen Jin worked very hard on linking up all the hills, and we had a very long hill park. If not, it would be just a small little park. And of course, we had Punggol Waterway, and we introduced together with PUB the idea of the ABC Waters program, which has been very successful. And we talked about even moving from the idea of a garden city into a city in the garden. So greenery is no longer just horizontal, it's becoming more vertical. And I'm sure in the next 5 to 10 years, this will be a lot more pronounced, and it will be something people recognize Singapore for. Now, it is also about using technology and capital to overcome constraints. All right? Because the land is constrained. So what do? So I think many of the agencies are very creative and innovative. So even in reclamation, how do you reclaim with less sand? All right? Waste. All right? How do we get rid of our waste? So we went into incineration, and we only dump the incinerated ash in Pulau Semakau, and reclaimed area in an island. We introduced things like the common service tunnel in Marina Bay. Many of my colleagues worked on this project. You can see them in the audience. HDB looked at renewable energy, and of course the story of water, about the barrage, how you create freshwater reservoirs, introduction of the deep tunnel sewage system, and the creation of new water. So really it's about using technology and capital to overcome our constraints. Now, I think planners slowly realized that it was very important to create software and hardware. In Singapore, we are very good at creating infrastructure. All right, we're probably one of the best infrastructure cities in the world. But I think a city is more beyond hard-built form. So we started to introduce a concept, I still remember this, on placemaking and place management. We looked at many cities in the world, New York, 42nd Street, Bryant Park, were very good examples, and even Sunset Strip in Florida. And we started to join, in fact I remember I brought URA to join the Placemaking Association of Australia, comprising of all the authorities that have waterfront development. Why? Because we wanted ideas on how to do waterfront development when Marina Bay took off. I think you are no longer inside, so URA, you want to rethink. But anyway, we learned a lot from Darling Harbour, Melbourne, and Brisbane South Bank, the software part, the events, and the organization. And so we introduced ideas like the New Year's Eve countdown, all right? And it's about making an emotional connection with people that they feel they belong. The Bay is theirs, and they put in their wishes on New Year's Eve. And we even did that while Marina Bay was under construction, because we needed to introduce Marina Bay to people even before the buildings were there. And we knew that we had to get stakeholders to take ownership of the places they had businesses in. So I think with some seed funding and a lot of persuasion, you now have like Singapore River One, a group of business people who are at Singapore River, Baywatch, Orchard Road Retailers Association, to take ownership of the place to promote their business. Of course, the overseas cities have done this very well, and my conclusion of why people overseas are prepared to get together, tax themselves, take out money, and promote events without relying on government. Why is that so? Because the government offered hardly any services to them. If they don't help themselves, they are not going to get this off the ground. I think here maybe sometimes we do too much. And we introduced sporting events. Actually, it was URA that introduced many sporting events into the Bay, like the Great Women's Run, the Great Kids Run. A lot of people thought it was STB, but actually it was URA. But STB did introduce the F1, so it's about events, about creating buzz in the city. And we created festivals, like the Bras Basah Bugis Night Festival, which NHB has taken ownership of, very successful. Heritage continues to be very, very important in the software and the hardware, which URA continued with. And the identity notes, not just about built heritage, but about special places that endear to us, which Wenjin talked about. And I think in the latest Master Plan 2013, URA has now introduced 3 more identity notes at Koh-Lim Village, Jalan Kayu, and Serangoon Garden. Now, it's not only about built heritage, but I think more and more people talk about nature heritage, real heritage, cemetery heritage. So I think planners have a very, very big challenge in trying to balance all this, even as we plan going forward. All right? And it's also about promoting architecture and urban design. I think especially in the last 10, 15 years, we have really, really focused on promoting this, and we have design advisory panels, Orchard Road Commission to encourage developers to do more and to redevelop. And we introduced even more urban design guidelines into the government land sale. So for example, Marina Bay didn't come about as it is because it was really guided by urban design guidelines where the buildings step down to the water. I have no time to talk about this, but just to let you know that every sale site that goes out, URA prepares urban design guidelines. Things don't just happen, they have to be planned and usually guided and steered. And of course, we had design competitions, we had awards, numerous awards to promote good architecture. We profile excellent architecture through exhibitions, and we profile promising young architects as well. It's also about working with the market. How do planners realize their plans? Actually, especially in the last 20 years, this particular URA doesn't really build, unlike the URA of the old, all right? But it does make things happen through sale of sites and through its plans and through a lot of persuasion. And even in the sale of site, they have to be very, very creative. So for example, in the sale of the Marina Bay Financial Centre, it was very difficult because it was just after SARS. How do we interest the developer to buy a piece of land that's going to cost over $1 billion? I see Keppel Land here. Anyway, they bought. So we tried to share the risk with them. So we said, look, take an options, all right, on the second piece of land. You pay a little bit, but you choke the site. Basically, options just mean choke the site, right? And after putting in the first building, I think the market took off and very quickly they bought the second piece of land. So I hope the consortium is very happy today. And Marina Bay Sands, we did a very different approach. We did a fixed price sale, but we chose the winner through what I call a beauty contest. And the criteria of the beauty contest was really based on the business and the design concept. And we had to try and market Marina Bay all over the world, in Cannes, in Hong Kong, in Europe, to get it to take off. And finally, just a quick word on public engagement. I think you can ask questions on this. I won't go into this. But I think we were much more open in the last 20 over years to invite more ideas from the public to give to us when we formulate plans. Now, I was asked to talk about HDB. There's no time because on its own is a big topic, but just a couple of words, all right, very quickly. As pointed out by Ellen, in '59 we had a lot of slums, and HDB was set up in 1960 to overcome the shortage of housing, which it did very successfully. But one key role that HDB held, which is very important in the urban transformation of the city, is that HDB was key to the resettling of squatters. We moved the squatters to HDB, all right, flats, which meant that we could clear the squatters, amalgamate the land in the city center according to now a proper master plan, the one that Ellen showed us. And as a result, bring in infrastructure to support new development so that we could sell the land. And that was how the city actually took off, the renewal. And of course, HDB has slowly improved on its designs. I'm not going to go to this. Ownership for HDB has taken off once we introduced allowing the CPF to buy housing. So today, home ownership is 95%. I'm not going to go into all this, but I think over the last couple of years, HDB has also moved on to do many new plans and design. I was telling Ting Chai we'll do this another day if you want to talk about HDB. But a very important last point is HDB doesn't only build new, it goes back and keep rejuvenating its estates through many upgrading programs. And this is very important to maintain the value for our residents and for Singaporeans. And also in the remaking our heartland programs, we continue to rejuvenate the estates. So, last slide. I think the key ingredients for success, Wenjin has mentioned some, I'd like to reinforce it. It's about being very visionary in your plan. It takes, I'm an architect planner, just as Wenjin is and Alan. It takes 3 years to build a building, but it takes 30 years to shape a city. So you have to be very visionary. Many people always ask me, did you envision Marina Bay to be like that when your first plan? I think we did, and it happened, all right? It's about being very creative, not to be afraid to introduce new ideas. It's about being very persevering. Planners need missionary zeal because it is such a long trajectory to get things to happen and many obstacles to overcome. And really, it's also not a one-man show. We built upon the shoulders of giants that came before us, and we work with many partners and many partner agencies to make the plans happen. And it's, of course, one key partner is the private sector. Without the private sector, we cannot realize the plans. And of course, it's about building strong institutions and people. And that's why I think when Jim made that very heartfelt call to URA planners, I will also say HDB, all right? You have to stay the course if you want your vision to be realized. And I almost am very confident you'll be able to realize it. There are many passionate and dedicated people in places like the URA, HDB, and many of the agencies, which very often we take for granted. It's about staying the course, and it's about the people, all right? And only with these, I think, we can really move from vision to reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cheong. May I now invite Mr. Philip Ng on stage, please?
Good evening, everybody. The fact that I'm the last speaker does does reflect something that happens on in the marketplace. And the public sector, individually, we know, I know Alan and Wenjin and Koon very well, and they're great people. But collectively, when they get together, they like to squeeze the private sector. Anyway, and frequently what happens is that the market thins out. This is what is happening. But anyway, I am going to try and deliver what I want to say really quickly, because I know you all have been taxed very heavily already today. But really, you're hearing from the titans of public planning, and the public sector has contributed the most, really, to what Singapore is today and to the urban transformation. Without the planners, and I think that Singapore not only builds infrastructure very well, but Singapore plans so well. I would dare say that if you were to rank Singapore anywhere against any country, any city in the world in terms of planning, we should be right at the top. And I'm saying this with a little bit of experience and having met a lot of people all around the world. And our fans, I'm sure many of you know, are really those that live outside of Singapore, those that visit Singapore. I don't know why, but we don't have so many fans in Singapore itself. Now, the very visionary positioning of Singapore goes back and harks back to Lee Kuan Yew, who envisioned Singapore as a garden city. And it's not original because he went to Vancouver, and Vancouver is the original garden city. But today, if you go to Vancouver, you don't see that it's not redolent of the gardens as much as Singapore is. And Singapore has evolved, has morphed to become a garden in the city. So really, like in business or in brand building, you've got to start with a very strong positioning, and your product builds and develops along the way with good people alongside that contribute. And so this garden city positioning is vital, I think very vital to what Singapore is today and to the urban transformation. I'd like to very quickly say that the urban renewal part of the first bit of urban transformation, and then moving on to the later stages of real urban transformation, is concomitant really with economic transformation. Because you could not in Singapore have today what we have in 50 years, such a vital, a global city, without both the economic engines and the economic development coming together with this urban transformation, which is the physical part, but it is coupled with these drivers of the economy. And so this startling economic development really stems from, again, good planning, visionary planning, and of course we know that this virtuous coupling has led to a 70 to 80-fold increase in our GDP from the time that Lee Kuan Yew took on the mantle as Prime Minister. So I'd like to characterize very quickly for all of you, from my viewpoint as a developer, the various decades and stages of what we've seen, the urban transformation. And this is actually also listening to what Alan and Wenjin and Koon have actually presented, but I just like to pull it together and characterize it as, in my own way as a developer. The 60s was the period of foundational planning, as I said, a very far-sighted vision and master plan. There we saw housing, industries, jobs, and food, which are, the key elements of what Maslow's talked about in his hierarchy, what is basic to society, the organizing, and today maybe we might think it is no big deal, but the way that hawker centers and wet markets were organized. So all these things actually came in the 60s. The 70s was a period of frenetic and unrelenting execution, very well organized because our government is very well organized, and again, latching onto this garden city theme. The 80s, because there was a downturn in the economy, there was a review of the economic structure, and a review again of the plans that we had, and I think Koon shared with us the concept plans and the master planning, but essentially that came also with some liberalization of rules and the CPF liberalization, HDB ownership. At that point in time, there was a divide between the HDB ownership and private sector or private housing ownership. If you own an HDB apartment, you could not buy a private housing, and that was all changed in that 80s period and leading into the 90s, and that actually transformed, of course, not just what we see today, but transformed the real estate market. And in the 90s, we had this revised concept plan sort of deliberations. The concept plan was actually revised 2001, but because the planners planned so well and so far in advance, they actually kick off the exercises way ahead. And I remember being involved in a focus group discussion and also leading focus groups on identifying what made Singapore distinctive and delightful and dynamic, and these were the things that were talked about, conservation being a very key component of this Singapore identity. Now in the decade of the 2000s, this is really the period that Singapore became a global city. We had, of course, initially the first few years of the decade, the problems of 9/11, and the world was in a recession and Singapore was in a bad shape. And in fact, the market was quite despondent, and that's why Marina Bay had very few takers. There was the SARS period, there was the tsunami. It was actually disaster upon disaster, and so there was not much interest in real estate development. But of course, unbeknownst to us real estate developers, Singapore was marching ahead, and what I think was the most important was that Singapore and the Singapore agencies began to really know how to sell Singapore. So you can see that when Alan took on the job as a general manager of URA, he told you that he had to market and market and market. And so he was probably the first great marketeer. And Wenjin as well in doing planning and concept or conservation programs and so also has to market, and of course Koon and URA and STB as well. So I think the 2000s to me is characterized by the fact that Singapore began to know how to sell itself, because we were no longer pitching to a local or regional audience, but to an international audience, and therefore products like Sentosa Cove were attractive, and all the products that we churn out became very attractive, and we see a lot of Chinese buyers, international buyers, to the chagrin of local Singaporeans. But that is a very important period in this urban transformation, because without this ability to communicate and inform, and here I want to just tell you very quickly what I learned from Catholic priest Monsignor Vaz about transformation. That transformation must start with information, inform, and the next is formation, form. So inform, form, transform. Not original, so I was attributed to Monsignor Vaz. But information is very important, and that is what the government has done very, very well. The plans have done very well. They've communicated, and at the same time, they formed the basis of the product. I mean, in Singapore, the infrastructure, the economic engines, the very good transportation, the high accessibility. In fact, today in Singapore, there is no bad site. As a developer, I'd like to tell you, there's no bad site in Singapore. 710 square kilometers, 5.4 million people, going to a population of 6.9 million people eventually, high penetration of MRT network and MRT station. I see some smiles. I'm not trying to sell anything. It's the government's job to do that. But I'd like to tell you that there are no bad sites in Singapore. So you can see why there are international developers that come to Singapore and Chinese developers that come to Singapore and just bid, without care, because it is, to them it doesn't matter, you can hit anything, it's going to be a good investment ultimately. And I would like to observe this and share this observation with you, that other than London, there's no other city with such a high participation of international developers as in Singapore. In Singapore, we have developers from Australia, funds. We have US funds that come to develop, like LaSalle Brothers. We have the local Singaporeans, we have Malaysians, we have Indonesians, we have Chinese, we have Hong Kong developers. We have very deep and large base of demand. A lot of them obviously bid. And just as what Wenjin said, that when my father saw the site in Marina Bay, he says, I want that site. All developers say, I want this site. Today in Singapore, everybody wants this site, but in every bid, there can only be one winner, so there are usually 11 or 12 other losers. So it shows that the communication, the information, and the formation has really taken place very, very well, and to the extent that you see this urban transformation. Now, I would say that right now, as we go through the 2010s period, that from the time of the 2000s period, where there was more macro governance, there was this liberalization attitude also, more macro governance, less of micro controls in the 2000s. I see the pendulum shifting a little. There's a bit more micro controls today, and a lot of measures, of course, as you all read in the papers. So there's great macro governance, but there's also a lot of micro controls, and I think this is where we need to strike a balance, because I don't think a regime and a regulatory regime can operate very successfully. There's very strong macro governance as well as micro controls. I think it has to be a balance of these things and adjusted. So I hope that people in this audience who are behind this can take heed of this. Now, as we move towards the 6.9 million people, I want to just highlight a few things. That we want to be a livable global city and continue to transform and continue to make progress on the urban development front. But we have challenges of dealing with the high aspirations of people in Singapore. They're very well traveled, and we therefore need to think of a new way of allowing more creativity and perhaps our planning, which has worked very, very well in Singapore in the early decades of very central planning. We need to think of how we can relax it at the fringes. Because one great thing about Singapore is that we have a very robust system. So we can experiment. If we do not have a robust system at heart, you cannot experiment. Because if you did experiments and you fail, it would be very bad. But in the scheme of things, in Singapore, Singapore has hardly failed in what they've done. So at the periphery, I think there is some room and avenue for experimentation and creativity. And I think one of the important things that we must remember about livability and a great city must be eminently walkable. Livability must also equate to walkability. And I do see that in Singapore we do not we have not paid enough attention on walkability, and sometimes I think the public sector is waiting for the private sector to do things like underground connections and so on, which really is not going to happen in a hurry, because the private sector is in it for the money, primarily, and at the end of the day, they're not going to see this if there's no immediate benefit. So there still needs to be, the market does fail. The market does not always anticipate the needs of the future, and that's where the regulators, the planners, and the people that make it happen, the public sector, must come in. So again, as I said, I'm reflecting what the private sector does. We wait for the planners, the public sector to put everything together, and then we come in and we hope to extract some value. And in the process, I hope that we can also contribute to this value chain. So thank you very much. I think you've been very patient on this.
Thank you, Mr. Ng. We have heard 4 very interesting lectures and will now proceed to the Q&A session. We have more participants in another room, the function hall, and have catered for a 2-way live feed for this Q&A. So just a quick house rule. Please state your name and organization before asking questions or making comments. You may raise your hand and our staff will hand you the microphone. We will be taking questions from this auditorium first, then from the function hall. So for participants in the function hall, please walk to the standing mics along the aisles. Thank you. I will now then hand over the time to Professor Kong and the speakers. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. You have been extremely patient, and we've already run over time as it is, but it's too good an opportunity to give up. We've 4 very distinguished, very experienced speakers with us this afternoon. So we've basically, I think, got till about 6 o'clock, and so 15 minutes is better than none. I will very quickly just kind of say, the urban situation, the fact that more than half the world's population now lives in cities means that urban transformation is an extremely important issue for many, many, many countries. And as Philip says, many countries, many cities actually come to Singapore to look to us and our experience and to try and learn from us. But within Singapore, as you quite rightly pointed out, of course, we are self-critical. And in the same way that many people have sort of pointed to the many success factors that Koon Hean spoke about, for example, the visionary leadership, the strong sort of professional team that stays the cause and that has a clear sense of what it wants to try to achieve and hangs on. There are also those who are critical and who say, well, are there not contradictions in our system? For example, you have a planning authority, a regulatory authority that is also at various points in time behaving like a developer, at other points in time where planning authority, a redevelopment renewal authority is also a conservation authority. Are these contradictions? How have we worked through these contradictions to be the successful city that in many ways we actually are? So let me just begin with the first question. I'll take the prerogative as the moderator to ask the first question, and then I'll open it up to the floor. My first question is to take off from something that Koon Hean said, which is that I love working with Koon Hean because when I was writing the book on conservation, she gave me so many quotable quotes. And here's another one. Things don't just happen, they have to be planned and guided. The question that I have for all members of the panel is, are there times when we plan perhaps a little bit too much? Where is the room for organic development in a situation like this? Perhaps I will begin with the private sector.
Yeah, I think in the early days of Singapore, and we have to really look at the time compressed sort of period, right? 50 years, and we've achieved so much. So truly, as Alan says, if URA did not step in to buy the land and assemble the land, things would not have happened. We would not have seen this renewal of the city. And today in Hong Kong, they struggle with it. So I can say that a very close sort of counterpart in Singapore and Hong Kong often are two cities, a tale of two cities. But in Hong Kong they struggle with it. So I think the Singapore model is not totally wrong. But today, 50 years on, given the remarkable progress that we've made and the aspirations of the populace and the young people, I think yes, there is a bit of room for letting the planning guidelines come off a little. But I think, again, it has to be in a controlled manner. You can't release or relax it right across the board. I think that would be wrong.
Okay, very quick, since it's my quote. Can I just clarify the quote, all right? I think planning is not one tier, okay? In a country's planning, there is very macro planning, which requires planning on a very strategic, from a very strategic view and a very long-term view, where you have to say, decide where is your regional center, for example, and where you have to decide the main transportation networks. Now, those things really need macro planning and generally by government. But as the planning becomes more and more layered and more detailed, there is a lot of room for participation by everybody else, all right? In fact, the more you come down the layer, in fact, the government should even be hands-on when you come to the design of the building or the project. But the macro planning really needs a lot of, so it's an inverse relationship. The more macro, the more the government is involved. As you come down the tiers, I think definitely we welcome more and more private participation and ideas.
To echo what Philip said, I mean, we now see the city we have, and it's easy to say that maybe the government has controlled too much, and managed too much, and so on. But I think had we not, it will be a very different story in Singapore. Now, for example, conservation. The complaints over the last 20 years was hey, what are you doing? You're cleaning up the whole place. But we say if you don't clean up the place, how do you start to even begin to save them? So there were advocates that say we should save the trades, we should save, even conserve the traders. Now, how do you conserve the people on site to ensure that the trades continue? How many of you buy clocks to wear, wooden clocks? You don't, right? They want to send their children to Harvard Business School as well, and not just continue doing clocks. So to me, I feel that we have to put in place the infrastructure, the physical environment, the software can come in place. That's where the private sector come in. And that's where the public-private sector can work together. And I call it, we have a planned chaos and not an organic chaos. Because I think we are in a happier position to sustain our city compared to other cities that has grown in a way that is an organic chaos. You just look around, you visit many cities near us, you can see it for yourself. But going forward, I think most of the physical infrastructure is in place. I do believe we can give a bit more room. I think we should encourage, in fact, the private sector to come in, citizens at large to come in and contribute. But then, on the other hand, we have to manage, with a remote control. Because you want to make sure that your city do not become a thematic play,
I think my time is a little bit different 50 years ago. I think I had the advantage that the public is not as well informed. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage is that the public, because they know very little, it became a very hard task for us. The only thing I said is that my time, we were more autocratic. They're less demanding. In everything, they look to government. So it was quite smooth sailing, provided we educate, inform them well, and demonstrate to them what we can do. So the challenges are quite different. But even during that time, we realized that planning is not static, and we have to keep moving on as I demonstrated under the URA. Our team had to first build very basic things, show to them what we mean, what we can do, and then persuade them to participate. So it was one of real persuasion to get them to understand what we're trying to do. But we were much easier during that time because as far as planning is concerned, we know where we're going to go. We know what we're doing is just a start. Our greatest job was how to attract the private sector to come in, because they had no chance of doing it because of the structure of the land and the multiple ownership that made it very difficult, especially clearance and so on. So our job was to try and come in and set the ball rolling by acquiring large parcels of land, assemble them, and then anticipate what is needed, and then offer it to them. So we demonstrated to them that at that point of time, we're the leaders. We planned and made sure that whatever we give to them is successful, as Philip said. There are no bad sites, but our time, we do have bad sites. Bad sites being sites we want, we cannot get it. But whatever it is, what we planned at that time was not, something static. We realized that our time, we only set the ball rolling, and we know greater things to come. And I think planning being one of them, although we have to be fairly regimented and controlled, there must be flexibility to meet up with challenges. The economic growth has changed, the profile of the population has changed, and so it goes on.
Excellent, thank you. It seems like a great opportunity to ask about those gangsters, but I shall resist. I'd like to open it to the floor. If you could identify yourself first. We'll start with this particular auditorium. Any questions? Yes, please.
My name is Supriya Sen. I'm an independent consultant, formerly with the Asian Development Bank. I found this discussion extremely fascinating, and just jumping off from the point where you made that Singapore is a distinctive, dynamic and delightful city. Absolutely agree with that, and very much so. Just wanting to know about technology and its ramifications on the city of the future, and how would you look at increasing innovation among the population, taking advantage of technology but still retaining that sustainability agenda? Any thoughts on that?
If I might direct it to Koon, because you did mention technology.
Actually, technology can be harnessed to make a city much better, and I think Singapore has done that very well. Going forward, there are lots of opportunities, especially with the advent of ICT development. I think the way in which people work would totally be quite different, because a lot of people may even work from home. So if you enhance the ICT environment, I think it increases, in fact, more opportunities for people. Another area which some of the agencies are sort of in the very initial stages of looking at is to develop Singapore as a smarter city. I think having a lot of data can be harnessed to improve, for example, the delivery of services to the citizens, and having sensors, for example. I think in New York, you embed a lot of sensors in the road, and you know exactly the traffic movements, for example. Of course, technology can also help with the ERP. I'm not going to talk about that. Satellite monitoring of cars and congestion, giving citizen information. There's a lot of things that technology can help us. And technology not only of ICT, but even technology of buildings, of material, of construction. There's a whole area of work in that. So I'll just leave it there. But certainly technology can be a great friend of us, especially when we are highly constrained by resources, whether it's land, water, energy, So technology is very important. Thanks.
Thank you. Just in the interest of time, so that we get more questions, perhaps I'll just leave it at that and not ask every panel member to respond. I hope you don't mind. Other questions? Yes, please, John.
What an afternoon. I'm going to ask a really off-the-wall question. I I think there's a very humble little thing that's also been very impactful in the transformation of the Singapore story. And that's when the point we changed from the control from NFA to GFA. And I think since that change, I know macroly we have to control and be a bit more cognizant of the planning and the visioning of the city. But like Koon said, as you go further down the layer, really you should relax, right? But what we found is that in a lot of instances, because of the control using the GFA mechanism rather than NFA, a lot of the regulatory control is very micro, like Philip said. Huh? So I don't know whether there's any possibility to turn the card upside down again and relook at how you want to control sellable space. Because at the moment, the GFA mechanism is really restricted. So a lot of design solutions are highly guided by the URA control rulings, I think. I don't know, any comments from anybody else? Thank you.
Together, this is not a new topic.
Can I? Yeah, I could. Not much to add to. Actually, as a developer, I do find that the GFA system, the envelope of the GFA, is a very good system. And one of the reasons why you have a very high participation of international developers that come to Singapore to develop, and not just to buy completed assets, but to develop, is that this is a very certain, definitive, and transparent system. And so I for one, would prefer that the system remained because I think it works very well. And another thing that keeps people in business wanting to operate in any regime is that the rules don't change too often. When the rules change too often, it's actually very confusing. And so, yeah, I speak on behalf, not because you're my good friends.
Please answer the question. Now, I don't know how many people actually understood the question. The net floor area versus the gross floor area. I don't know whether you understand why John is coming from there. Quick bit of history. First, I don't speak on behalf of URA because I'm no longer the CEO. So please take this as just some background and a personal view. When I was a very young planner, I spent some time as a development control planner, which means I look at regulations, all right, rather than all these visionary things, you know. And I learned a lot because what happened was we used to control a floor space using the net floor area. That means only whatever the developer can try to rent out, right? But what happened is it degenerated into a cat and mouse game of how you design, because people only focus on the net floor area because that's what we charge you for, the development charges, and then they played around with the remaining, what we call the neutral area, and you have really very creative developers out there, all right? You could actually have a flat being sold when the balcony is bigger than the flat, you know, something like that. So it became such an issue whereby the planners had to go through the plans in such great detail just to make sure that the plans are clear. What is net and what is gross is very clearly distinguished. It just took an inordinate amount of time. So in the end, in fact, the gross floor area is a broader control than the net floor area because it gives you broadly a floor space. Then it's up to you. If you want to use more spaces for neutral because it's a luxurious condominium, go ahead, you know, because the planners are not going to control that. So that is the reason. So many people have said, go back to the net floor area. Let me remind you that those who have gone through it will find that that was quite a horrendous system. Files just used to pile out and we could not give planning approval because we were checking the net versus the gross floor area. So that is a very micro issue, but we can take this offline and can debate the pros and cons. So I think actually, in terms of rules, you should try to give as broad as possible and let the developer decide what he wants to sell to the market. I think in general, that is the concept behind the development control rules. I'm sure it's still like that today in URA? Any DC planner here? You should answer the question.
I like to caution on the other hand. I think the gross floor area approach also can create more problem in time to come. You can begin to see some development. The developer tried to achieve 101% efficiency, as a result of which you find that common lifts, lobby, passageway, etc. are really getting down to a very minimum. So the environment can degenerate as well. But now that I'm out of URA, I do sit on the board of developer. I do feel, on the other hand, the URA development control guidelines need to probably do a substantial review, and perhaps we should move from prescriptive to more performance-based approach, so that it gives the developer room for creativity. So long it must be the spirit of the guidelines, and so long whatever they propose that do not comply with your guidelines, we should take a second look. Because if you go on performance approach, if the modification does not impact negatively on what your guideline is trying to protect, then it should be a yes and not no all the time. Because when I was in office, I always have to ask my planner, each time a creative idea come in, they say no. I say, why no? They say it doesn't comply with the guidelines. Then I say, review the guidelines. If the new idea does not achieve a negative impact, but rather give a plus. So I think going forward, there is room for the control guidelines to be relooked and modified the way we deal with it.
I fear that we perhaps just have time for one last question, and I'd like to ask if there are any questions from the other room. No? Okay. If not, then perhaps there's a hand up there, and I feel that will have to be the last. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm BM from Vice Organization. As Singapore is my adopted country, like most of us who adopt Singapore as a country, we really appreciate more than the ingenious Singaporean what the planners have done to Singapore. But my question is on the future. Given that the aging population, what are the authorities thinking about planning to cater for those of us who are aging? Thank you.
Something close to my heart. Perhaps you start.
No, actually, I'm not going to answer your question, but just to say that you should count yourself fortunate to be at Far East Organization, because at URA, right, if you're delivering a child, you have to vet the... edit the documents, you know, so, wow, you guys are so lucky.
I should join Far East Organization. Okay, again, I cannot speak on behalf of URA, but I think it's worth having a look at the master plan consultation exercise. If you go to the URA website, there's lots of information. But I can speak on behalf of HDB. Yeah? We are actually very, very seriously looking at the issue of aging. But aging doesn't have to be negative. I think we're trying to see how we can harness the energy, because aging is a continuum. Nobody just become aged. We all age very slowly and it creeps up on us, right? So, and actually, if you look at many cities, many people age very gracefully and are very active, and I call it the young aged and the middle aged, and it's only towards end stage that you really become aged. So really, I don't think we should age before our time, alright? So in HDB, we are now looking at how we actually plan. And there are many, many policies like the studio apartment. It's not just about the physical environment, it's about helping them into retirement, looking at retirement adequacy, how do you help them to monetize the flat. That I'm talking about is more the HDB. But in the general environment, I think you already have many agencies looking at it. For example, universal design, that is imposed on everybody. It's a good code by BCA. It is actually to help us to move around when it gets a little bit more difficult outside. So I think in terms of design, a lot is being done. Of course, the The question is, are there other products in the market? This one Philip can answer, whether he's going to do retirement housing, I don't know. But I mean, these are things that the private sector can also participate. But clearly for HDB, there are a lot of schemes in place. I don't have time to talk about it today. So in our website, there's a lot of information. All right, you can talk to us separately if you have questions. Thanks.
Okay, well, just because it's 10 minutes past 6, I feel we'll have to call the session to a halt, but I know that you must have enjoyed this afternoon as much as I have and learned a great deal. Would you join me then in thanking the four speakers?
Dr. Cheong, Mr. Ng, and Professor Kong. We'd now like to invite Mr. Koo to present our speakers and moderator with a token of appreciation. Mr. Koo, please.
Yeah.
What do you want
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our lecture. Thank you for your participation and do join us in our lectures next month.